I was standing in the kitchen of my parents' house in Springfield, Missouri, when my mother dropped the bomb. Donna Hayes, 65 years old and still bossy as ever, slammed her coffee mug on the table and barked at me like I was a teenager who forgot to take out the trash. "You have 48 hours to get your stuff out. The house is Melissa's now." My father, Richard, sat across from her with his arms crossed, staring at his plate like it had all the answers to world peace. He didn't argue, didn't blink, didn't even clear his throat. He just nodded along like a good little sidekick. My parents had just announced in one casual sentence that the house I had been paying for, maintaining, and basically keeping alive was now a gift to my younger sister. Let me be clear, this wasn't just some random piece of property. This was our family home, the place my grandfather built brick by brick, the place where I had lived for years, the place I kept standing after my parents fell on hard times. I didn't just pay a bill or two. I covered the mortgage when Richard lost his job. I sent money from overseas when I was deployed. I fixed the leaky roof, paid off repairs, and yes, even replaced the air conditioning when it broke in the middle of July. I practically kept the house on life support. And Melissa? She wasn't even here. She was 3 states away in Los Angeles, posting pictures on Instagram of overpriced cocktails and beach selfies while I was sweating in uniform in Afghanistan. My parents adored her, though. To them, Melissa was a rising star. To me, she was the ghost sibling, who showed up only for Christmas dinners and even then, left early. So when my mom spit out that ultimatum, I just froze. 48 hours? Who even gives their own kid a 48-hour eviction notice? I half expected her to hand me a pink slip or have the sheriff waiting outside. I glanced at Richard, hoping for some sign that this was a twisted joke. Nothing. He just shifted in his chair and scratched his neck like this was any other Thursday. Here's the funny part. They expected me to argue, to beg, to cry. They thought I'd blow up like a bomb and give them the satisfaction of saying, "See, that's why Melissa deserves the house, because you're unstable." But I didn't. Years in the Army taught me one thing. Sometimes silence is louder than words. I just stood there, arms crossed, staring back at my mother like she was a drill sergeant who forgot who she was barking at. Inside, though, I was boiling. This wasn't some random betrayal. This was years in the making. I'd been blind to it, thinking all the money and sweat I poured into the house was proof of loyalty, proof I was the good daughter. In reality, it just made me a convenient ATM. The moment Melissa decided she wanted the house, I was disposable. Donna must have thought she won because she leaned back in her chair, smug, like she just checkmated me in a game of chess I didn't know we were playing. "You heard me, Victoria. 48 hours. Pack it up." Alder. Melissa wasn't even in the room, but I could hear her voice in my head. Snarky, entitled, probably laughing about how she scored a free house while I got booted out like unwanted furniture. The kind of sibling who'd tell you to your face, "That's just how things are," and then ask to borrow money 5 minutes later. I didn't give them the reaction they wanted. I walked out of that kitchen without saying a word. My boots echoed down the hallway like gunshots. My old bedroom door creaked when I closed it behind me. The same bedroom I paid to repaint, the same floor I paid to refinish, the same ceiling fan I bought so my dad wouldn't sweat through his shirt in summer. Now I was being told none of it mattered. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the walls, and I swear I could feel the weight of every dollar, every hour, every sacrifice pressing down on me. 48 hours. That was all the time they were giving me to erase myself from the house I kept alive. It didn't take long for the anger to turn into something sharper. I wasn't a kid anymore. I wasn't the type to sit around crying over being wronged. I'd been trained to handle chaos, to make plans under fire, to adapt when everything went to hell. My mother thought her ultimatum was the end of the story. For me, it was just the starting gun. I grabbed my phone, scrolled past Melissa's picture-perfect California lifestyle posts, and opened the Notes app. Old habits kicked in. Mission planning. Timeline. Resources. Weaknesses. Strengths. I wasn't about to just leave quietly. Not after everything I had put into this place. Every instinct in me screamed that something bigger was going on. People don't just hand over a house without paperwork. Melissa didn't magically inherit it out of thin air. If they were pushing me out this fast, they had something to hide. I could almost hear my old squad leader's voice in my head. "When someone gives you a timeline, Vic, it's because they don't want you to have time to think." Well, Tough luck for them. 48 hours was more than enough time for me to think. I wasn't leaving empty-handed. That was for damn sure. I had receipts, literal receipts for nearly everything in the house. The furniture, the appliances, the paint, the repairs. All of it came out of my paycheck, not theirs. They wanted me gone, but they weren't going to get to enjoy the things I worked for. The silence in that bedroom wasn't defeat, it was calculation. While my parents probably patted themselves on the back for resolving the family drama, I was building my next move. They wanted a fight? They were going to get one. Not the screaming match they expected, but a fight on my terms, in a way they couldn't win. The clock was ticking, but so was my plan. And when the 48 hours were up, nobody in that house was going to look at me the same way again. My hands gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white, but I didn't type a word. I set it down on the nightstand and leaned back, staring at the ceiling fan I had bought myself. The blades spun slowly, steady, like the rotors of the helicopters I'd ridden in overseas. Just like that, I was back in uniform. The smell of diesel, sand in my teeth, the endless noise of engines and gunfire, it all came flooding back. I remembered those nights in Afghanistan when the desert air dropped below freezing, and we huddled in tents trying to get a few hours of shutai before another patrol. Every month, part of my pay went straight home. I didn't think twice. My parents needed help, and Melissa sure as hell wasn't going to provide it. I wired money, sometimes more than I could afford, telling myself family comes first. I remembered the time I got the call from my dad, his voice heavy. We're behind on the mortgage. We might lose the house. He didn't say it out loud, but I could hear the shame bleeding through every pause. I was half a world away, but that house kept me tethered to home. I called the bank on a satellite phone, my rifle leaning against my leg, and drained my savings to cover the payment. One of my squad mates, Torres, laughed at me. "Man, you're fighting two wars. One here, one at home." He wasn't wrong. That was the thing. I didn't just fight overseas. I fought to keep that house alive. I fought to make sure when I came back, there'd still be a place waiting. And now, my parents acted like I was some squatter who overstayed my welcome. It wasn't just the money, it was the labor. Every time I got leave, I wasn't out drinking or traveling like the others. I was back here, in Springfield, with a hammer in one hand and a credit card bill in the other, replacing warped floorboards, repainting peeling walls, fixing that creaky staircase my mom complained about for years. I was the maintenance crew, the landlord, the bank, all rolled into one. Meanwhile, Melissa would FaceTime in with a glass of wine, bragging about her job in PR like she was running the White House. "You're so good at fixing things, Vic," she once said, grinning at me through the screen. "That's your thing, right? Being responsible." She said it like it was a punchline. I laughed it off, but inside it stung. She wasn't wrong, I was responsible, too responsible. I thought back to one night on deployment, when the base got hit. Mortars came down, dirt flying everywhere, alarms blaring. My heart was pounding out of my chest. When it was over, and the dust settled, I called home. I just needed to hear a familiar voice. My mom picked up, and before I could even say I was okay, she said, "Melissa just got promoted. Isn't that wonderful?" I didn't tell her about the mortars. I didn't tell her about the friend we lost that night. I just said, "Yeah, that's great." Then I wired another $2,000 to cover a new roof leak. Melissa got champagne. I got silence. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. The divide wasn't new. It wasn't born in that kitchen when Donna gave me the ultimatum. It had been there all along, growing like a crack in the foundation, only I refused to see it. I patched the house. I patched the family. I kept patching until I didn't realize the whole damn structure was leaning. My chest felt tight, but not from sadness. It was the kind of tightness you get before a fight. My training kicked in again. Assess the situation, identify the threat, understand the terrain. My battlefield had changed from desert sand to suburban carpet, but the principles were the same. Melissa was the golden child. Richard and Donna had picked their side. I was outnumbered 3-1, but that never scared me before. What mattered wasn't how many people stood against me. It was whether I had the strategy to win. I looked around the room again. The dresser? Mine. The curtains? Mine. Even the damn mattress? Mine. I paid for all of it. That wasn't just furniture. It was evidence. Evidence that I didn't just live here, I invested here. I sat back down on the bed and pulled out my notebook. Years ago, overseas, I'd filled notebooks with patrol schedules, supply counts, quick sketches of terrain. Now I was sketching out my own home like it was a new operation. Not a battle with bullets, but one with receipts, documents, and planning. Step 1. Inventory everything I bought. Step 2. Get copies of the bank statements and mortgage records. Step 3. Figure out what my parents weren't telling me. Because no way in hell did Melissa magically get this house legally. If they were hiding something, and I was sure they were, I'd find it. I wrote until my hand cramped. The plan wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The silence of the room didn't bother me anymore. It was the kind of silence before a mission. Calm, but charged. I remembered something my old squad leader said once, right before we rolled out of the gate. Don't ever forget, Hayes. Nobody's coming to save you. You either fight smart, or you don't fight at all. Those words hit harder now than they ever did back then. Because that was the truth. Nobody was coming to save me here. Not Richard, not Donna, and definitely not Melissa. If I wanted to keep what was mine, I had to fight smart. I closed the notebook and set it on the nightstand. The hum of the ceiling fan was steady, almost like a metronome marking the time I had left. 48 hours wasn't long, but I'd faced tighter deadlines, and I'd won before. The next morning, I walked into the living room and found Donna already on the phone with Melissa. Her voice was soft, almost sweet, the kind of tone she never used with me. She was laughing at something Melissa said, like a teenager gossiping with her best friend. When she noticed me, she covered the receiver with her hand and gave me a look like I'd interrupted a private club meeting. It wasn't new. I'd seen the favoritism my whole life, but now it was so obvious it felt like they weren't even trying to hide it. Melissa called twice a week, sometimes more. When I called from deployment, I got rushed answers, maybe a stay safe if they remembered. But when Melissa called, the whole house turned into a stage, and my parents were her biggest fans. I sat on the couch I paid for, watching Donna pace back and forth, giggling at every word. I couldn't help thinking how many times I'd handed her money for bills while she used that same cheerful tone to ask Melissa about her new apartment in Los Angeles. I was the one who kept the lights on, but Melissa was the one who got the spotlight. Later that day, I ran into Mr. Henry outside, our neighbor across the street, a retired Army vet himself. He always had a kind word for me. He nodded toward the house, lowering his voice. Heard your mom bragging about Melissa again. You'd think she built that house herself. I smirked, but it wasn't funny. She hasn't been here in years, I said. Henry shook his head. People notice, Victoria. Don't think they don't. You've been the one holding this place together. His words stuck with me more than I wanted to admit. At least someone saw the truth. That evening, Donna called me into the kitchen. Richard was sitting at the table sipping coffee like it was his full-time job. Donna put her phone down and crossed her arms. Melissa's taking over, and that's final. You've had your time here. She deserves a chance to make this house her own. I almost laughed. Melissa hadn't hammered a nail or paid a single bill, but somehow she deserved it. Deserve? I asked. What did she do to deserve it? Besides, call you once in a while. Richard cleared his throat, finally finding his voice. She's starting a family, Victoria. She needs a stable place to live. You're single, you have your own career. You can manage without it. That hit harder than I expected. So now I was being punished for not having kids? For choosing a career that didn't fit their idea of settling down? It wasn't about fairness. It was about convenience. Melissa gave them the image of a daughter they could brag about, and I gave them bills they didn't want to pay. I kept my tone flat. So I bust my ass overseas, send money home, pay the mortgage, fix everything that breaks, and you're saying I don't need this house because I didn't give you grandkids? Donna's eyes narrowed. Don't twist my words. This is what's best for the family. I'd heard that line before. What's best for the family was always code for what's best for Melissa. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on, but before I could respond, the doorbell rang. It was Linda, the neighbor from next door, carrying a plate of cookies like she always did. She glanced between us, clearly picking up on the atmosphere. Everything all right in here? She asked gently. Donna pasted on a smile. Of course. Just family business. Linda's eyes flicked to me. She handed me the plate. You've done so much for this house, Victoria. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. Her words were quiet, but sharp. I nodded, grateful for the backup. As soon as she left, Donna muttered under her breath, "She doesn't know what she's talking about." But I knew she was rattled. Donna hated when outsiders saw through her act. The divide wasn't just inside the walls anymore. The neighbors saw it. The community saw it. Melissa might have been the golden child in my parents' eyes, but out here, people knew who actually kept things running. That night, I sat in my room, eating one of Linda's cookies, and thought about how deep the divide really went. It wasn't about who worked harder or who sacrificed more. It was about perception. To my parents, Melissa was the success story, the one they could show off. To me, she was the one who disappeared when things got tough. And yet, every time she popped her head back into the picture, they welcomed her like royalty. Meanwhile, I was treated like the hired help, useful, until they decided I'd outlived my purpose. The crack in our family wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. They had chosen their side, and by choosing Melissa, they had drawn the line in the sand. I knew exactly where I stood now. I looked at the notebook on my nightstand, the one with my growing plan. The more they pushed me out, the clearer my path became. This wasn't just a family spat anymore. This was about exposing the truth, showing everyone, including Melissa, that I wasn't someone they could just erase. I shut my door that night and pressed my back against it, blocking out the muffled sound of my parents chatting in the kitchen like nothing had just happened. They probably thought I was sulking, but sulking was never my style. I'd learned long ago that the best weapon wasn't yelling or crying, it was patience. I sat down at my desk, pulled open the drawer, and took out a stack of old receipts I'd been keeping in an envelope. Furniture store, hardware store, appliance center, proof of everything I had poured into this house. Each slip of paper felt like a round in my arsenal. My parents thought I was helpless, that I'd pack up and leave quietly. Wrong. I grabbed my notebook and wrote a single word at the top of the page. Mission. The Army drilled into me the same process every time we had to prepare for an operation. Break it down, know the objective, gather resources, and execute. That method had kept me alive in combat zones, and it would work just fine here in Springfield. Step 1. Identify what was mine. Not in the sentimental sense, but in the legal, black and white sense. I walked around the room and wrote down every item I had paid for: the dresser, the mattress, the nightstand. I moved on to the living room, noting the sofa, the TV, the rug, and even the curtains. If it came out of my paycheck, it wasn't staying behind for Melissa to enjoy. Step 2. Gather proof. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. The transaction history stretched back years. Every mortgage payment I'd covered, every repair, every upgrade. I started saving the records, screenshot by screenshot. My parents could dismiss words, but numbers were harder to ignore. Step 3. Keep quiet. The instinct to confront them right then was strong, but I knew better. I had seen enough fights in my family to know how it would go. Yelling, crying, Donna playing the victim, Richard nodding along like a mute statue. That was their playbook. I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. Instead, I stayed calm. When Donna walked past my room later and peeked in, I gave her a tight smile like I was already resigned. She bought it, I could tell. She smirked, satisfied that her ultimatum had worked. Perfect. Let her think I'd surrendered. The truth was, I was just getting started. I spent the next morning combing through the house in silence. Every time I passed my parents, I kept my expression blank, like I was going through the motions. Inside, I was scanning, cataloging, filing away details. Years of military habit made me methodical. I checked the basement, the garage, even the attic. I remembered hauling boxes up there after Richard's back surgery. Half of what was stored was mine, paid for with deployment checks. While I worked, I thought about Melissa. She had no idea what she was walking into. In her head, she was probably picturing moving into a fully furnished house, bragging to her friends about how her parents handed down the family home. She'd post a photo on social media with some cheesy caption like, "New beginnings." She had no clue that everything she expected was already slipping through her fingers. The silence around me was almost comforting. It reminded me of the moments before a mission, when everyone was checking gear, loading weapons, reviewing maps. There was no need for noise, just focus. At lunch, Donna tried to prod me into conversation. She asked if I'd started packing yet. I nodded, chewing my sandwich slowly, She seemed pleased. Richard kept staring at his coffee mug like it held the secrets of the universe. I didn't bother asking what he thought. I already knew whatever Donna said was law. That night, I laid out everything I'd collected so far on my bed. Receipts, bank statements, photos of the repairs I'd made. It was more than just paper. It was leverage. If they wanted to play dirty, I could play smarter. I looked at the notebook again and added one more step. Secure legal support. I knew exactly who to call. Jessica Connors. We'd served together, and now she was a lawyer. If anyone could cut through the mess, it was her. But I didn't dial her number yet. Timing mattered. Instead, I closed the notebook and leaned back in my chair. The anger that had boiled in me yesterday had cooled into something sharper, steadier, resolve. My parents thought they'd cornered me, but they'd only given me clarity. Every move they made revealed their strategy. Favor Melissa, push me out, hope I'd go quietly. But they underestimated me. They forgot who I was. I wasn't some pushover kid anymore. I was a veteran who knew how to plan, how to execute, and how to hit where it hurt. And this time, I wasn't going to fire warning shots. The clock was still ticking, but instead of fear, I felt calm. The kind of calm that comes when you've already decided you're not backing down. The next morning, I woke up with the same kind of focus I used to have before a patrol. I grabbed my phone, scrolled to Jessica's number, and hit call. She picked up on the second ring, her voice steady, professional, but with the same sharp edge I remembered from our army days. Vic, been a while. What's going on? I didn't waste time with small talk. My parents are kicking me out of the house. 48 hours. They say it's Melissa's now. There was a pause on the line. Melissa? The sister who sends Christmas cards late, if at all? Yeah. That one. End quote. Jessica exhaled, and I could practically hear her sliding into lawyer mode. Do you have anything in writing? Deed, will, title transfer, anything? No. That's the problem. They didn't show me a damn thing, just an ultimatum. Then something smells off, she said. Property doesn't just change hands like that, not legally. If Melissa suddenly owns the place, there should be paperwork. I could feel my jaw tightening. They've been hiding something. I want to know what. I too. Jessica didn't hesitate. Give me the address and your grandfather's name. He was the original owner, right? Yeah, I said. Built the house himself. Then there should be a record filed with the county. I'll pull it. Give me a couple hours. I hung up, feeling a surge of energy. Finally, I wasn't just carrying this fight alone. Jessica wasn't just a friend, she was someone who knew how to hit back with precision. While I waited, I kept working my inventory, snapping photos of receipts and sending them to a cloud folder. Documentation wasn't glamorous, but it was effective. If this turned into a legal fight, the paper trail would matter. By early afternoon, my phone buzzed. Jessica's voice was clipped, urgent. I found something, Vic. Your grandfather left a will. And get this, it names you as the sole heir to the property. For a second, I didn't even breathe. Me? You're sure? It's notarized and filed. Clear as day. He left the house to you. Not to your parents. Not to Melissa. To you. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed. My grandfather's face flashed in my mind, those long summer days when he'd tell me, "This place will always be yours, kiddo." I used to think it was just his way of being kind. Turns out he meant it. Jessica's voice cut through the haze. Your parents had access to this will. They chose not to tell you. Instead, they let you pour money into the house, then tried to hand it over to your sister. The betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. I clenched my fist until my nails dug into my palm. They knew, I said quietly. All this time, they knew. Yes, and that's not just unfair, it's legally dangerous. If the will hasn't been probated, they don't have the right to transfer the house to Melissa. What they did was hide the truth and act like they still owned it outright. I laughed bitterly. So, they basically tried to steal it. That's one way of putting it, Jessica said. Look, we need to move quickly. If we file for probate, the court can validate the will and recognize you as the legal heir. That locks the property in your name. I rubbed my temples. And what about the mortgage? I paid tens of thousands into it. Even better for you, she said. That proves you treated the house as your responsibility. Judges notice that. But the key here is the will. It's ironclad. For the first time in days, I felt a spark of control. Not just anger, not just frustration, control. My parents' smug little plan wasn't airtight. They thought they could sweep me out in 48 hours, but now I had leverage they couldn't touch. Jessica didn't sugarcoat it. It won't be easy. Your parents will fight it. Melissa will whine and stomp her feet. But the law is the law. And this time, it's on your side. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Send me a copy of that will. I want it in my hands. Already did, she said. Check your email. I opened it, and there it was. My grandfather's signature, the notary's seal, my name spelled out clearly. There was no mistaking it. It was mine. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. All those years of sacrifices, all those paychecks sent home, all the nights I told myself it was worth it suddenly, they had weight again. My parents hadn't erased me completely. My grandfather had made sure of that. I thought about Donna's smug smile, Richard's silence, Melissa's entitled laugh. They had no idea what was coming. I grabbed my notebook and added a new heading, legal strike. Under it, I wrote Jessica's name, the will, probate filing, receipts, bank records. This wasn't just a plan anymore. It was a campaign. When Donna knocked on my door later, asking if I was packing yet, I opened it just enough to show her the calmest expression I could manage. Yeah, I said flatly. I'm getting things together. She nodded, satisfied, and walked away. She had no clue that the only thing I was packing was evidence. As the sun went down, I sat by the window, watching the neighborhood settle into its evening routine. Kids on bikes, Mr. Henry mowing his lawn, Linda watering her flowers. Normal life going on like nothing had changed. But inside this house, the ground was shifting. The ultimatum had been their opening move. The will was mine. I shut my laptop and felt the kind of focus I hadn't had since my last deployment. Jessica had given me the ammo. Now it was up to me to run the operation. I opened my notebook again and drew a big box on the page, writing 4 letters inside: UDA. Observe, orient, decide, act. The same loop I'd used in the army to keep myself alive was about to guide me through a family mess. Observe. 48 hours was the window. That meant every minute mattered. I wrote down the facts. Parents hostile, sister entitled, legal leverage secured but not yet filed, house full of items I purchased, neighbors supportive. Orient. Assess the battlefield. They thought I was alone, but I wasn't. Jessica was in my corner. The receipts, the bank statements, the will, they were resources as strong as any gear I carried in uniform. I also had the element of surprise. As far as Donna and Richard were concerned, I was passively packing. Good. Decide. 2 tracks. 1. Remove what was mine so Melissa walked into an empty house. 2. Prep the legal strike to secure the property officially. Both would hit hard, one after the other. Act. Execution had to start now. The first call I made was to a moving company. A guy named Tom picked up. He sounded skeptical when I asked about a rush job, but when I explained I wanted everything hauled out in less than 48 hours, he whistled and said, "That's tight, but we'll make it happen." I gave him the list: TV, washer, sofa, dresser, and anything else I'd tagged. He promised to have a truck at my place by noon tomorrow. Next, I started tagging items around the house with sticky notes. Blue meant mine, yellow meant theirs. Walking through the living room, I slapped a blue note on the sofa and TV, then moved to the dining room chairs I bought after Donna complained the old ones hurt her back. Blue. The rug Melissa once spilled wine on during one of her rare visits? Blue. By the time I finished, half the house looked like a color-coded map. Every step I took reminded me why I was doing this. I wasn't just moving furniture. I was stripping away the illusion that Melissa was inheriting a ready-made life. If she wanted a house, she could start from scratch like I had to. The next step was building a timeline. I wrote it out hour by hour in my notebook. Morning, finalize documents with Jessica. Afternoon, movers arrive. Evening, secure belongings in storage. Parallel track, prep probate filing with Jessica's firm. I didn't have to win every battle in 2 days, but I had to make sure I didn't lose the war. Dinner that night was awkward. Donna made spaghetti, and Richard poured himself a glass of cheap wine. They chatted about Melissa's upcoming move. like it was already set in stone. I kept my head down, twirling pasta on my fork, letting them believe I was resigned. Inside, though, I was 3 steps ahead. At one point, Donna smirked at me. "You've been quiet. Accepting things finally?" I smiled faintly. Just focused. It wasn't a lie. After dinner, I slipped outside for some air. Mr. Henry waved from across the street. "You holding up, soldier?" he asked, leaning on his fence. "Always," I said. He didn't need details, but the look he gave me said he already knew more than I was letting on. Back inside, I double-checked the folder of receipts and records, then scanned them into a USB drive. Redundancy mattered. In the Army, you didn't just rely on one comms line or one supply drop. You built backups. This was no different. Before bed, I called Jessica again. She was still at her office, papers rustling in the background. "I've got the probate petition drafted," she said. "We'll file it tomorrow. Once it's in the system, the court process starts. Your parents won't be able to pretend the will doesn't exist." "Good," I said. "The movers are coming tomorrow too. By the time Melissa shows up, she'll be walking into an empty shell." Jessica chuckled. "That's one way to make a point." "Not just a point," I replied, "a statement." When I finally lay down that night, I didn't toss and turn. My mind wasn't cluttered with what-ifs anymore. I had a plan, and it was already in motion. The ticking clock didn't scare me. It focused me. By morning, I was up early, coffee in hand, walking the perimeter of the house like I used to do before patrols. The sticky notes were still in place. My notebook was open on the counter. At exactly 11:45, a white moving truck pulled up, and 3 guys hopped out. "You must be Victoria," one of them said. "Let's get started." I walked them through the house, pointing out the blue tags. They moved fast, lifting the sofa, wrapping the TV, hauling out the washer without complaint. Each item carried out the door felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Donna peeked into the living room halfway through, her jaw tightening as she realized what was happening. "What on earth are you doing?" I didn't raise my voice. "Taking what's mine." Her eyes narrowed. "Melissa needs that furniture." "She can buy her own," I said flatly, turning back to the movers. Richard hovered in the background, silent as usual, gripping his coffee mug like it was his lifeline. By the time the truck was loaded, the living room looked bare. The movers gave me a receipt and promised the items would be secure in their storage facility. I thanked them, handed over the payment, and watched the truck pull away. Inside, the house felt hollow, stripped of comfort. Donna's expression was a mix of fury and disbelief. She muttered something about ungrateful under her breath, but I didn't bite. I wasn't here for her words anymore. I went back to my notebook, checking off the action items. Movers, done. Documents, nearly ready. Next, meet Jessica to sign the probate paperwork. Everything was lining up. The house wasn't a home anymore, it was a battleground, and I was done fighting defensively. The house was quiet after the movers left, but the silence didn't last. By late afternoon, a car door slammed outside. I looked through the window and saw her Melissa, rolling her suitcase up the driveway like she was checking into a hotel she didn't pay for. She had sunglasses on, her hair styled perfectly, and that permanent smirk that made me want to laugh and punch a wall at the same time. I opened the door before she could ring the bell. She brushed past me without so much as a hello, heels clicking across the hardwood floor I paid to refinish. She stopped in the middle of the living room, spinning slowly like she was waiting for someone to yell, "Surprise!" Her jaw dropped. The sofa was gone. The TV was gone. Even the rug was gone. All that was left were bare walls and a floor echoing her footsteps. "What the hell?" she snapped, whipping off her sunglasses. "Where's all the furniture?" I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. "I took what I bought." Her face went red. "You can't just strip the place. Mom and Dad said this house is mine." I raised an eyebrow. "Your house? Really? Show me the deed, Melissa. Show me one receipt where you contributed a single dime." "This." She threw her hands up, pacing like a soap opera star. "Oh, please, you think you're entitled to everything just because you threw some money around? Mom and Dad made their decision. They wanted me to have this house." I stepped forward, lowering my voice. "You weren't here. You didn't fix the leaks. You didn't cover the mortgage. You didn't repaint the walls. You were in California sipping overpriced lattes while I kept this place standing. Melissa's laugh was sharp, bitter. And that was your choice, wasn't it? No one forced you to play handyman. You stayed here because you had nothing better to do. That's not my fault. That line hit harder than I wanted to admit. I clenched my fists, but I didn't give her the reaction she wanted. Instead, I pointed toward the empty wall. Looks like you'll have plenty of space to decorate. Good luck with that. She stormed into the kitchen, yanking open cabinets like she expected me to have cleared those out too. You took the microwave, she shouted. Yep, I said casually. Bought it myself. The washer? Mine. The curtains? Also mine. She spun back around, eyes blazing. This is insane. You gutted the house. Only the parts I paid for. Melissa fumbled for her phone, dialing in a fury. I'm calling Mom. You're unbelievable. I shrugged. Go ahead. They're not here to protect you. She stomped toward the back door. Phone pressed to her ear. I could hear Donna's voice shrieking faintly through the speaker as Melissa ranted about the empty house. She paced, waving her free hand dramatically. When she hung up, she pointed at me like she was handing down a sentence. They'll be back tonight, and when they get here, you're finished. I tilted my head, calm as ever. Then I'll see them tonight. Melissa huffed, grabbed her suitcase, and dragged it upstairs like she was staking a claim. The wheels banged against each step, a perfect soundtrack to her tantrum. I stayed downstairs, pacing slowly, letting the adrenaline settle. That first clash had gone exactly as I wanted. Melissa came in expecting comfort. Instead, she got reality. I walked back into the living room and looked at the empty space where the sofa used to be. Most people would feel lost staring at bare walls. I felt the opposite. Every missing piece was proof that Melissa couldn't just waltz in and take what wasn't hers. An hour later, I heard her stomping around upstairs, slamming closet doors, muttering under her breath. I didn't need to hear every word to know the gist. She thought I was selfish. She thought I was bitter. What she didn't realize was that bitterness wasn't my weapon. Strategy was. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, steadying my hands. The confrontation was only half over. The bigger storm was on its way with Donna and Richard. But I wasn't rattled. If Melissa wanted to play queen of the castle, she'd learned fast that castles fall when they're built on lies. When I walked past the hallway mirror, I caught my reflection. My uniform wasn't on, but the stare was the same, the one I used before missions. Calm, focused, unshaken. Melissa had brought drama into the house, but drama didn't win battles. Discipline did. She might have claimed the upstairs for the night, but I wasn't worried. I had already claimed the ground that mattered. Evidence. Receipts. The will. And Melissa had no idea just how far behind she really was. I was sipping my water when headlights swept across the living room wall. Tires crunched in the driveway, followed by car doors slamming. Melissa bolted down the stairs, her face lit up like backup had finally arrived. She swung the front door open before I could move. Donna marched in first, Richard trailing behind like a shadow, both looking around as if they were entering a crime scene. What did you do? Donna snapped, her eyes darting over the empty living room. Where's the furniture? The television? The washer? Melissa pointed at me like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. She gutted the house. She stripped everything. I set the glass down on the counter and spoke evenly. I took what I paid for. Donna's face turned red. This is Melissa's house now. You don't get to vandalize it. Vandalize? I laughed. Taking my belongings isn't vandalism. It's called ownership. Want the receipts? Richard finally spoke, his voice low but sharp. This isn't how family handles things, Victoria. That was it. That one-word family made my blood boil. I stepped forward, pulling a thick folder from the counter. You want to talk about family? Let's start here. Bank records, mortgage statements. Every payment I covered when you couldn't. That's over $80,000 from my pocket. Next, receipts for every major repair and appliance. I kept the house running while Melissa was too busy taking selfies on the beach. Melissa rolled her eyes, but I didn't stop. I opened the folder wider, showing a stack of neatly clipped papers. And this is the kicker. Grandpa's will. Filed, notarized, official. He left this house to me. Not you. Not Melissa. Me. End of teen. For the first time that night, Donna's mouth snapped shut. Her eyes flickered toward Richard, whose face drained of color. Melissa blinked, trying to process what she just heard. "You're lying," Donna said finally, her voice shaking. "There was no will." I slid the top page out of the folder and held it up. "Read it." His signature, the notary stamp, filed with the county. "I didn't dig this up on a whim. My lawyer did." Melissa snatched at the paper, scanning it with wide eyes. "This can't be right, Mom. Tell me this isn't real." Donna stammered, reaching for words that wouldn't come. Richard looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. I pressed harder. "You knew about this, didn't you? You had access to the will, but you never told me. Instead, you let me pay the mortgage, fix the roof, replace the furnace, all while you were planning to hand the place to Melissa." Richard shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. Donna squared her shoulders, finally finding her voice. "We did what was best for the family." I barked out a laugh. "There it is again. The family. What you really mean is what's best for Melissa. You lied to me, stole from me, and now you're shocked I didn't roll over and play along." Melissa tried to interject, waving the will like a fan. "Even if this says the house is yours, Mom and Dad were the ones keeping it together. You don't get to erase everything they've done." Hand clip. "Everything they've done?" I stepped closer, my tone sharp. "What exactly did they do, Melissa? Because from where I'm standing, they let the bills pile up, relied on me to clean up their mess, and then acted like you were the chosen one." The silence that followed was brutal. Donna's jaw tightened, Melissa's face twisted in disbelief, and Richard just sat down heavily in a chair, rubbing his temples. "You think you can just walk away with this house?" Donna said finally, her voice cold. I leaned on the counter, keeping my tone even. "I don't think. I know. Legally it's mine. You tried to erase me, but Grandpa made sure that wouldn't happen. The court will back me up." Melissa's voice cracked. "This is insane. I was supposed to live here. This was supposed to be mine." "Supposed to be," I repeated. "That's the problem. You were promised something that was never yours to begin with." Richard finally lifted his head, his expression weary. "Victoria, you don't have to do this. We can work something out. Now you want to negotiate?" I shook my head. "You should have thought of that before giving me a 48-hour eviction notice." Donna slammed her hand on the table, but it didn't carry the authority it once did. "This isn't over." I closed the folder and tucked it under my arm. "You're right about that. It isn't." The tension in the room was so thick it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Melissa glared at me from across the room, clutching the will like it might disintegrate in her hands. Donna's face stayed locked in a scowl, but her eyes betrayed the fear creeping in. Richard sat quietly, defeated. I didn't raise my voice, didn't scream, didn't beg. I just let the silence do the work. Because in that silence, every single one of them knew the truth. They had been caught, exposed, cornered, and there was nothing they could say to undo it. The next morning, I drove downtown and parked outside Jessica's office. My folder of documents sat in the passenger seat like a co-pilot. I grabbed it and walked in, boots hitting the floor with the same rhythm I used to feel in formation. Jessica met me at the door, already holding a stack of papers. "Ready?" she asked. "Always." We sat across her desk, and she slid the probate petition toward me. "This is the filing that forces the court to validate your grandfather's will. Once it's entered, your parents can't just pretend it doesn't exist." I scanned the lines, every word cementing what I already knew. The will wasn't a suggestion. It was the law. I signed where she pointed, each stroke of the pen feeling like a hammer blow. Jessica leaned back, tapping the papers into a neat stack. "We'll file it today. I've also flagged the mortgage activity. If your parents used the house as collateral when they had no right, that puts the bank in a tough position. They could be facing serious trouble for accepting it." I raised an eyebrow. "So not only did my parents try to screw me, but the bank let them?" She nodded. "If the property legally belonged to you all along, then any loan they took out against it is questionable. We'll let the court untangle that mess. The point is, you're on solid ground." For the first time in days, I felt the weight shift off my shoulders. Not gone, but lighter. I wasn't fighting shadows anymore. I had legal artillery backing me up. After the filing, Jessica and I stopped for coffee. She stirred her cup, giving me that look she used to give before missions, the one that meant she was calculating risks. "They're not going to take this quietly. Expect pushback." But the law doesn't care about hurt feelings. I smirked. Good. Feelings are their specialty. Facts are mine. Back at the house, Donna and Richard were waiting like prison guards at the door. Melissa was pacing behind them, her arms crossed. The second I walked in, Donna pounced. Do you think you can just humiliate us in court? Drag this family's name through the mud? I dropped the folder on the kitchen counter with a satisfying thud. I don't think. I know. The papers are filed. The court will decide. Not you. Melissa's face twisted. You're insane. You can't just erase what Mom and Dad promised me. They promised you something they never had to give. I shot back. Grandpa didn't leave this to them. He left it to me. That's the end of the story. Richard rubbed his forehead like he had a migraine. We were just trying to keep things simple. Simple? I leaned in. You mean keeping me in the dark while I paid for everything? That's not simple. That's fraud. The word hung in the air like a grenade. Donna stiffened, Melissa's mouth fell open, and Richard looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. I didn't need to yell. The truth was louder than any scream. The phone rang that afternoon, Jessica again. Quick update, she said. The court accepted the filing. You're officially the heir on record. Your parents will get a notice, but the judge already marked the will as valid. They can contest, but they'll lose. The law's on your side. I thanked her and hung up, then walked into the living room where Donna and Melissa were sitting in icy silence. Congratulations, I said, setting my phone on the table. You're looking at the legal owner of this house. Melissa jumped to her feet. This isn't fair. I raised an eyebrow. You want to talk about fair? Let's. Fair would have been telling me about the will 2 years ago. Fair would have been not using my deployments to squeeze money out of me. Fair would have been respecting the person who actually kept this house standing. So yeah, Melissa, life's not fair. But for once, it's not unfair to me. Donna opened her mouth, but no words came out. Richard just stared at the floor. I picked up my folder and walked upstairs, leaving them to stew in the silence. Later, Jessica called again with another twist. The bank's scrambling. They realized your parents used the house as collateral when they didn't legally own it. They're in hot water. You don't need to worry, though it won't affect your title. I couldn't help but laugh. So they not only lied to me, they managed to screw themselves too. Pretty much, Jessica said. And the best part? There's nothing they can do now. The law's locked in. That night, I sat by the window in my room, looking out at the streetlights flickering on. Neighbors walked their dogs, kids rode bikes, life went on. But inside this house, everything had shifted. The ultimatum had been their attempt to erase me. The legal strike was my answer. And this time, there was no coming back from it. The phone wouldn't stop buzzing the next morning. Donna had left 4 voicemails before I even poured my first cup of coffee. Melissa's voice showed up in 2 of them, shrieking in the background about how I ruined everything. I deleted them all without listening past the first few seconds. Their panic wasn't my emergency anymore. When I stepped outside to get some air, Mrs. Linda was watering her flowers across the street. She waved me over. Heard there was a bit of drama last night, she said carefully, though her eyes said she already knew plenty. I leaned on the fence, sipping my coffee. You could say that. She gave me a knowing nod. I always knew your grandfather wanted this place for you. He told me once, when he was out pruning that oak tree, said you were the only one who really cared about the house. Her words hit me harder than I expected. It was proof from someone outside the family, someone with no agenda. She patted my arm. Don't let them bully you. The neighborhood knows who kept this place alive. By the afternoon, word had spread farther than the fences. Mr. Henry stopped by, wiping grease off his hands from working in his garage. Heard your folks tried to play fast and loose with that will, he said bluntly. Damn shame. You did all the work, they hid the truth, and somehow you're the bad guy? Not in my book. Then, I thanked him, and we stood there for a while, both of us watching the street like we were on lookout. The community wasn't buying the version Donna and Melissa were selling, and that shift mattered more than they realized. Meanwhile, inside the house, Melissa was unraveling. She stomped around with her phone glued to her hand, calling friends in California, crying about how she'd been betrayed. None of them seemed to have the magic solution she wanted. Every so often, she'd march into whatever room I was in and demand to know how I could do this to her. My answer was always the same. I didn't do this to you. You did this to yourself by expecting something that was never yours. Donna tried a different tactic. She cornered me in the kitchen one evening, her voice soft and almost pleading. You don't understand, Victoria. Melissa needs this house. She has a future to build. You're strong. You'll be fine anywhere. Run. I set down the knife I was using to chop vegetables and looked her square in the eye. I already built a future. I spent years serving overseas, sending money back here to keep you afloat. If Melissa needed a house, she should have worked for it. My strength doesn't make me disposable. Donna's lips tightened, and she walked away without another word. The real kicker came 2 days later when I found Richard in the garage, staring at the boxes I'd stacked neatly to sort through later. He looked older than I remembered, shoulders slumped, eyes tired. You blindsided us, he muttered, not looking at me. I crossed my arms. You blindsided me first. You could have been honest about Grandpa's will. Instead, you hid it. You wanted me to keep paying, keep fixing things, while pretending I didn't matter. He rubbed his face, sighing. We thought Melissa needed it more. That sentence told me everything I needed to know. They hadn't acted out of ignorance or confusion. They'd made a deliberate choice. Melissa's comfort over my sacrifices. And now they were shocked the choice had consequences. Neighbors started noticing too. Donna had always loved parading Melissa around at church events and barbecues. But now, whispers followed them instead of compliments. People who used to smile at my parents were suddenly distant. They all knew about the will. They all knew who had been paying the bills. One evening, Mrs. Linda caught me again, her tone sharp this time. They're embarrassed, you know. Everyone's talking, hiding that will. It's not something folks forgive easily. I shrugged. That's their problem, not mine. Inside, Melissa was throwing another tantrum. She slammed her suitcase shut and dragged it down the stairs. I'm done with this nightmare, she snapped. I'll figure it out on my own. But don't think this is over. I stepped aside, letting her drag the suitcase out the door. Good luck, I said, not even pretending to sound sincere. The house felt quieter without her constant stomping, but Donna and Richard's cold glares filled the space. They still couldn't say out loud that they'd lost. They just simmered in silence, waiting for me to crack. But I didn't. I had weathered worse storms than a couple of angry parents. I'd faced down firefights in deserts, slept on the ground in the rain, survived with nothing but grit. Compared to that, this was just noise. By the end of the week, Jessica called with another update. Your parents are sinking fast, she said. The bank wants answers. Their lawyer filed a half-hearted objection, but the judge dismissed it immediately. The will stands. The house is yours. End of story. I thanked her, though the words felt almost unnecessary. I already knew. The look on Donna's face every time she passed me in the hall was proof enough. That night, as I sat in the empty living room, I realized how much had changed. The furniture was gone, the air heavy with tension, but I felt lighter than I had in years. Melissa was out. The neighbors knew the truth. And my parents? They were finally facing the fallout of their own choices. The morning after Melissa stormed out, the house felt heavier, not lighter. Donna shuffled around the kitchen, slamming cabinet doors, while Richard sat at the table pretending to read the paper. Neither of them looked at me. That silence, thick and deliberate, was supposed to punish me. Instead, it confirmed what I already knew: I didn't belong here anymore, and maybe I never really had. I brewed my coffee, sat across from Richard, and broke the silence. I've decided to sell the house. Donna's head snapped up. You can't be serious. I'm dead serious, I said. This house isn't a home anymore, it's a battlefield, and I'm done living in one. Richard lowered the paper slowly, his face pale. You wouldn't. End quote. I leaned back, sipping my coffee. I already spoke to Jessica. The market's strong. Buyers are lined up for places like this. Once it's sold, we all walk away. Clean break. Donna's voice shook with rage. This house is our legacy. You can't just erase it. Funny, I said. That's exactly what you tried to do to me. For a moment, the room went still. Richard looked down. Donna clenched her jaw, and I felt the calm that came with making a final call in combat. Once the decision is made, you don't look back. Later that day, I called a realtor. Her name was Brenda, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who showed up in jeans and boots instead of a stiff suit. She walked through the place with me, nodding as she made notes. Structurally solid, she said. Updates in the kitchen, new roof, hardwood floors, it'll move fast. Donna followed us from room to room, muttering under her breath. This is ridiculous. This house isn't for sale. Brenda didn't even blink. Legally, it's Victoria's call. That shut Donna up for a full 30 seconds, which might have been a record. By the weekend, Brenda had buyers lined up. When I signed the paperwork to list it, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. This house had been my duty station for years, but like any assignment, it had an end date, and this one was overdue. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. Some people were shocked, others supportive. Mrs. Linda stopped me on the sidewalk. I can't blame you, honey. A house isn't worth your peace. Mr. Henry added, better to sell it on your terms than let it rot in all that drama. Even the movers I'd hired called to check in, joking that they'd be ready when it was time to haul the last load. The community seemed more relieved than upset, like they'd all been holding their breath while my family tried to tear me apart. Meanwhile, Donna and Richard grew more desperate. One night, Donna cornered me in the hallway. You'll regret this, she hissed. You're tearing the family apart. I stared at her, steady. You did that when you chose Melissa over me. Selling this house isn't tearing us apart. It's cutting the cord you wrapped around my neck. Richard tried pleading the next morning. Think about what you're doing. Where will we go? You should have thought about that before you gambled with a will you knew existed, I replied. This house isn't your safety net anymore. You'll figure it out. End quote. When Brenda called a week later with an offer above asking price, I didn't hesitate. I signed the acceptance papers that night. The closing process moved fast, almost too fast for Donna and Richard to process. They spent their days pacing, whispering in corners, making frantic phone calls. I ignored it all. My focus was on the future. On the final day, I walked through the house one last time. The empty walls didn't sting the way I thought they would. Instead, I felt relief. The memories here were mine, but the weight wasn't. When the buyers pulled up in their truck, Donna stood on the porch, arms crossed, glaring like she could stop the deal with sheer willpower. Richard leaned against the railing, defeated. I handed the keys to Brenda, signed the last paper, and it was done. Donna's voice cracked as I walked past her. You're selfish, Victoria. I stopped and looked her dead in the eye. No, I finally chose myself. There's a difference. I got in my car, started the engine, and didn't look back. For the first time in years, I wasn't tied to them, this house, or the guilt they used to keep me under control. I was free. The sound of gravel crunching under my tires felt different when I left the driveway for the last time. I wasn't carrying the weight of a house or the endless drama it came with. For once, it was just me, the road, and a quiet that actually felt peaceful. I rented a small apartment on the edge of Springfield. Nothing fancy, but it had sunlight pouring through the windows and no voices screaming behind closed doors. That alone felt like an upgrade. The first night there, I sat on the floor with a takeout pizza, staring at my boxes stacked against the wall. My sofa, TV, and washer, the things I fought to keep, were there with me. They weren't just furniture anymore. They were proof that I didn't let myself get erased. I chewed a slice of pizza, laughed at the silence, and thought, so this is what freedom tastes like. Work became my anchor. The cyber defense firm I joined had me diving into systems and simulations that required precision and patience, the same kind of focus I learned in uniform. My coworkers were sharp, sarcastic, and didn't care about family drama. All they wanted was results, and that was a language I spoke fluently. Jessica stayed close to. She called to check in, sometimes stopping by with Thai food and a bottle of wine. She'd grin and say things like, you know, most people who leave the army don't immediately launch a full-scale legal offensive on their families. You really don't do anything halfway. I'd laugh and remind her she was the one who pulled the trigger with the probate filing. Still, the nights hit differently. There were moments when I caught myself staring at the ceiling, wondering how things had gone so wrong with the people who raised me. Part of me wanted to feel guilt for cutting them off, but the truth was I didn't. I'd given them years of loyalty, money, and effort. In return, they tried to hand my life over to someone else. That wasn't love. That was betrayal wrapped in family photos. Melissa tried reaching out once. She sent a text that said, "Hope you're happy ruining Mom and Dad's lives. You'll regret this." I stared at it for a full minute before hitting delete. I didn't block her because of anger. I blocked her because she no longer deserved access to me. News about them trickled in through neighbors and mutual acquaintances. Melissa ended up scrambling to buy a condo in Los Angeles. The girl who thought she'd inherit a fully furnished house had to sign a 30-year mortgage instead. Donna and Richard moved into a small rental on the outskirts of town. Their reputation in Springfield took a hit. People weren't quick to forgive when they found out they'd hidden a will and tried to cheat their own daughter. None of that gave me joy. But it did give me closure. Actions had consequences. For once, those consequences weren't on my shoulders. I spent weekends exploring parts of Missouri I'd ignored before, quiet hiking trails, little diners off the highway, the kind of places where nobody knew my name and nobody cared about the Hayes family drama. It was liberating to realize I could exist without their shadow looming over me. One Saturday, I walked past a military recruitment booth set up outside a hardware store. A young sergeant in crisp uniform was handing out pamphlets. He looked nervous, probably his first weekend assignment. I stopped, shook his hand, and told him I'd served too. His eyes lit up, and he asked for advice. Stay sharp, stay honest, and remember that the real battles are never the ones you expect, I said. He nodded like he was hearing gospel, and I walked away with a strange mix of pride and sadness. The Army had taught me discipline, resilience, and strategy. My family had taught me how to use those skills off the battlefield. Sometimes I wondered what my grandfather would think if he could see all this. I like to believe he'd be proud, not because I fought my family, but because I refused to let them take me down. He built that house brick by brick, and maybe he knew from the start that I was the only one who'd understand what it meant to protect something worth keeping. Selling it wasn't betrayal. It was liberation. The house had served its purpose. It gave me a place to stand while I figured out how strong I really was. On quiet nights, I sat by my apartment window with a notebook open, jotting down goals. Not military objectives this time, but personal ones. Travel, career milestones, maybe even building a home of my own someday, not one inherited through lies, but one I earned, paid for, and filled with people who actually cared. The biggest lesson? Blood alone doesn't guarantee loyalty. Family isn't defined by who shares your last name. It's defined by who shows up, who has your back, and who doesn't try to cut you out the second it benefits them. I used to think the hardest battles were overseas. Turns out, the real war was in my own kitchen, sitting across from people who smiled at me while planning my eviction. And the victory wasn't in humiliating them, it was in walking away with my dignity intact. As I turned off the light one night, I caught my reflection in the window. No uniform, no medals, just me. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. Because the truth is, the biggest mission I ever had wasn't in Iraq, or Afghanistan, or anywhere on a map. It was right here, surviving betrayal, cutting ties that strangled me, and finally building a life where I wasn't the expendable daughter. And that mission? I won. Looking back now, I don't see myself as the soldier who lost a house, or the daughter who got betrayed. I see myself as someone who finally stopped letting other people write my story. My parents tried to hand my life to Melissa, but in the end, they only handed me a reason to fight smarter. The Army taught me strategy, but this fight taught me boundaries. I can live without their approval. I can live without their house. What I can't live without is respect for myself. And walking away, on my own terms, was the clearest victory I've ever had.